Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guests today, Larry Woods, Democratic strategist, and Steve Gill, Republican strategist. We're talking about the testimony in Washington by James Comey this week. Gentlemen, I think we established in the first block that there was no smoking gun that came out of this. But Larry, probably the closest thing is this whole thing around the conversation between the president and Comey in the White House, where he said he hoped that he would not proceed with any continued investigation into the fired former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. There seems to be some dispute about that. The president raised the possibility there are tapes. Isn't it time for him to come out one way or the other and say there are tapes of that conversation? They're not?
Surely the Senate Investigating Committee or Robert Mueller's special counsel team will issue a subpoena for the tapes, at which point the president's going to have to either say, no, they don't exist, or yes, they do, and I'm not going to give them to you, or yes, they do, and here they are. We'll find out. But I think there was a smoking gun, and the national media keeps missing this. The obstruction of justice statute's very clear. There are 3 different ways you can commit the crime of obstructing or attempting to obstruct justice: by obstructing, by impeding, or by attempting to influence. The conversation between the president and the FBI director of, I hope you will let Flynn go or let it in now, clearly is an attempt to influence the investigation. That is the smoking gun, unless President Trump denies that he said that.
Well, Steve, the Republican surrogates on President Trump's side were basically sort of using that word hope to say, well, if he really meant it, he would have ordered him to do it right there on the spot. But that's kind of a thin line or a small island to make your last defense on something that could be a very, very serious charge.
And the criminal statutes are very clear that if, in fact, Director Comey believed that that's what was taking place, he had an absolute obligation to do something about it. The fact that he didn't do anything about it at that time shows that what Donald Trump is saying is, you know, it was a hope, an expression of a hope. And one of the senators asked very clearly yesterday, has anybody ever been charged, convicted, or prosecuted on a hope of something happen? And Comey said that it has not happened.
Well, of course, there's a different standard here as well. We were talking about what it takes to be criminally charged with it, but the standards that the House would use and the Senate would use in an impeachment process are not the same level. They're not at the same. They're not.
You still have to have a crime.
Well, but you still don't have. But you don't have to have the level of proof on those that you would if this was going into a federal case. Is that not correct, Larry?
Well, the debate with Bill Clinton's impeachment and with Richard Nixon's investigation, the understanding of the framers, if you want the original intent, is that impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanors includes bad behavior. Now, I mean, jaywalking, no. Do I think there's been enough bad behavior by President Trump to merit an impeachment process? My personal opinion at this point, no. Do I think there are going to be more bad examples come up, considering the background and how he operates? Yes. So I think we're going to get to that. We're just not there yet, I don't think.
I would underline, though, that you got to put the context of when Donald Trump expressed his, I hope you'll let this go, not as a direction, not as a directive, I hope you'll let this go, was about 2 days after the media had exonerated Flynn from these phone calls that had supposedly been so bad, and the fact that he had supposedly lied to Mike Pence about a call he didn't mention. It was after he had been, quote, cleared of that, and it was, I think, he had been fired, and Trump was saying, hey, I hope you can let this go, and he was speaking specifically about Flynn, not the Russian investigation, and in fact, Trump specifically said, if there are other satellite operatives who have done something wrong, go after them. That completely cuts against the whole theory that he was trying to interfere with an investigation.
But if you're an average person and you're in with your boss and your boss says, "Gee, I really hope you'll do this," do you hear you need to do this? Not you need to not hear the word hope. I mean, it seems like most people in that situation would say, "Okay, I think I know what I'm supposed to do."
Or if it was a direction that was an obstruction of justice, James Comey had an obligation to actually take action about it. He didn't. He didn't believe it was obstruction of justice.
3 different times. The way the FBI opens an investigation is with something in writing. He immediately went out to his car, took a classified computer setup, laptop setup for classified documents, and did a memo none of us have seen at this point, about what just happened in the president's Oval Office. That's how you start an investigative case file in the FBI. Somebody's got to do a memo to the file. The U.S. attorney called me today and said, open this, or I observed this behavior, or I had this conversation. That's exactly what he did. Next, within 24 hours, he contacted the Attorney General of the United States, Mr. Sessions, to say, look, something irregular was going on here in the meeting with the president. and then he pursued the whole thing.
But Larry, the Democrats like Comey a whole lot more now than they did last year during all the Hillary Clinton. Are they a little late to the party? Does that not look like they're just doing this for disingenuous
the ones
reasons?
that have inherited that label, I think they are late to the party. You know, the real issue here is not the political disagreement between Steve and I or the two parties. The real issue here is the Russians tried to hack our election. Not the first time they've tried. We're not the only victim. France, England, Ukraine. They're going to try it again. They've suffered no consequences for trying to do it. And President Trump is dropping the ball. He, as our leader, he ought to be out there every day or certainly every week saying, we are investigating this. Here's what we found so far. Here's what we're going to do about it. And to the degree he does not do that, that's going to pay terrible political dividends for him at the next election.
Steve, there was very little conversation about this whole Russian issue in terms of what they have done and what they might continue to do. And Comey brought that up at least a couple times, that they're still out there, they're still active, and they're going to be back in 2018.
Two things. First, I want to mention that the classified document that you referred to Comey typing out right afterwards, that's the classified document he then leaked illegally and should be charged.
Two different documents.
I think it's a different document.
Well, I think the fact that he was leaking classified information is something that ought to pursue a criminal
his memo
charge
was not
against him.
classified. It was not classified by anybody. I don't believe it this
He was leaking classified information about the confidential conversations with the President of the United States.
There is no privilege for a conversation with the President.
If you
it's
are
not attorney-client, it's not patient doctor proof. There is no privilege.
See, I knew we'd get to where I didn't have to ask you a question, but I do need to take a break. Larry Woods and Steve Gill are our guests. We're talking about, of course, what's been going on in Washington this week, more on the Russia investigation, more on President Donald Trump and James Comey, the fired FBI director. Back to continue this conversation after you watch these messages.